let's together take a closer look about the difference that convergence has made over the last decade. Over the last decade, we've convened over 300 leaders for dialogue leading to action across 10 projects. And for those of you who are new, what we do is we convene the stakeholders with the knowledge, the resources, and the commitment to make change on a critical national issue. Like leaders listed on this slide here, all of whom have participated in our dialogues. And typically these groups, they tend to work in silos. They often put huge amounts of resources towards results that sometimes conflict with one another. And what we do is we build the relationships and bridge the differences so that all these groups can be directing their energies towards a common purpose. Now, our work is based on the idea that there's no one individual or organization that alone can bring about change on complex and critical issues facing the country. It takes the collaboration of many. And we take the same philosophy towards how we look at our impact. So as we evaluate our work, we're not looking only for ways that we alone caused certain results to occur. Rather, we want to understand what our contribution has been to advancing progress on the important issues we address. In shorthand, we look at our contribution, not just attribution. So how do we know what impacts we're having? We have a system of evaluation that we use for each project that includes a bunch of tools that are listed here. We use surveys after each meeting to get feedback from the participants. We have conversations with each participant after each meeting to debrief, to hear from them about what they see is going well and what's not, to get ideas from them about how to move things further forward. Our teams debrief so that we're reflecting and capturing learning and understanding how we can maximize the progress and success of the work. We have checklists that we use when we're observing dialogues to see, does it look like the group is building relationship? Are they laughing? Are they sharing stories? Are they sitting with people that they didn't, ever think they wanted to be within a mile's reach of? And then at the end of the dialogue, we do more surveys to find out what are the ways in which the group's recommendations have been adopted by the organization? How is the person themselves changed? Are they more willing to work with people that they disagree with, et cetera? So today I'm going to talk about our impact in 4 different categories. We're going to look at convergence to influence on the government, on businesses, on nonprofits, and on individuals. So let's start with our impact on government. Some of this you've heard a little bit this morning in other people's presentations, but I'm just going to go a little bit deeper. So we have 3 primary examples of our work in impacting government. This includes our work on long-term care, our work on health reform, and our work on budget process reform. And here you see a picture that's about 3+ years old of our long-term care financing collaborative in 2016 when they announced their shared agreement and the recommendations that they came to. Time passed, and we didn't quite know what had happened with those ideas. They were ready, if anybody might take them up. And recently we discovered that one of our stakeholders actually took the group's proposals, refined them, and created a different proposal that was similar but based on a lot of the same ideas. And now that proposal has been shared with members of Congress, and as Rob mentioned earlier today, it's become the basis for a draft bill that's being proposed by Rep. Frank Pallone, who actually chairs the House committee that has jurisdiction over health care and long-term care policy. So in this case, it took some time, but our ideas were incorporated into draft legislation. Another example is with our health reform work, and in 2017, as the country and as Congress was really, stuck in a lot of debate around the Affordable Care Act, we brought together a group that included experts who both helped create the Affordable Care Act and also those who'd worked hard to dismantle it. And they were able to reach bipartisan agreement on how to strengthen the healthcare system. And many of the recommendations that were reflected in bipartisan legislation in the Senate in 2017 mirrored the group's recommendations. And so you might ask, well, how did this happen? Our work received a lot of coverage in major outlets, and including over 100 different media outlets. And the way that we see it is that our efforts really helped reshape the perceptions of both policymakers and the media on what was possible in terms of bipartisan agreement. You've heard a little bit today about our Building a Better Budget process work. This is our last example of how we've influenced national policy making. And basically, several of our group's proposals were included in legislation that was considered by a committee last year in Congress. And also, these ideas are now part of legislation. Here you see our very own Matt Owens testifying before a Joint Select Committee on Congress with another stakeholder. So what I want you to take away from this is that in all three examples, our stakeholders' ideas have made it into draft legislation in Congress. And although we can't control the dynamics of what passes into law and what doesn't, we see this pattern as an encouraging sign of the power and reach of our stakeholders and the solutions that they develop. And then our more recent impact on the government, as Rich shared this morning, is we've been invited to work with the Congress's bipartisan working group. And this actually came about as a result of our budget process work, where the members of Congress that we were meeting with to educate them about our proposals were very impressed with Convergence's unique approach and with its neutrality. And as Rich shared today, there's tremendous potential here. We're very excited to be able to strengthen their relationships and help them to be more effective as they work towards bipartisan legislation. So another area of impact is in the business sector. And I'm going to give you a couple of exciting examples here. One is our project on nutrition and wellness. So as part of that project, Convergence worked with the National Association of Convenience Stores for several years. This is a group that represents over 150,000 convenience stores across the country. And they shared that our work with them really enabled their industry to better provide healthier choices to consumers across the country. And I'll just tell you a little bit about what we did. We partnered with them to create and test strategies to grow sales of healthier food and beverages. So for example, our staff went to different convenience store locations and tested how might we sell healthy dinner kits at convenience stores, and tested things like what happens if you combine healthy snacks into the unhealthy snacks. Will people buy more healthy snacks? And NACS created several case studies based on the pilot tests that we did. They shared those case studies with their stores nationwide. And when we were recently going back to look at the data, we were very excited to see some of the results. Again, we don't take full credit for any of these results, but we're proud of the contribution that we were able to make to advance their progress. So now, more than 2 in 5 NACS retail members said that they stocked more fresh fruit and vegetables over the first 6 months in 2018. And they now sell $250 million in fruit and $4 billion in water sales, which is an increase from a few years ago. So we're very happy to have been able to be a part of that progress. Another example comes excuse me, from our economic mobility work, very capably led by Russell, which basically helped many major American companies, including Walmart and McDonald's, who were both stakeholders in this project, to shift their practices regarding education and training for their workforces, to develop career pathways initiatives, and to access predictable schedules. And here you can see these stories are not about us, but these are stories in the news about the progress that these groups have made that occurred partially as a result of their participation in our dialogue. So Walmart is making significant investments in all 3 of those areas: education and training, career pathways, and schedules. And this will increase their mobility, the mobility and earnings of their staff over time at a very low cost to their employees. And we're very gratified to have played a role in shaping the opportunity-focused agenda for the largest private sector workforce in the country. Similarly, McDonald's has continued expanding its existing programs to provide tuition assistance so that workers can obtain credentials and degrees at a low cost, so they can obtain English language skills and access to high school diplomas and technology that helps them determine their future career options. Another example of an impact on the business sector comes from the Chamber of Commerce, who participated in our economic mobility project. And they recently shared with us that their participation in our project influenced their decision to expand their parental and family leave policy. So now let's look at the nonprofit sector. Our work has created a national network of nonprofits that are working to transform K-12 education in the United States. It's also led to new partnerships among nonprofits that did not previously work together. So, as was discussed a little bit earlier today, as a result of our dialogue on reimagining K-12 education, in 2015, Convergence launched a new initiative called Education Reimagined, whose focus was really on trying to move and accelerate this emerging student-centered or learner-centered movement across the country. And over the last several years, part of how they've done this is they've identified and convened and created a network of nonprofits all over the country, national and regional, that are helping to collaborate to advance the building of public will, to create more models and systems to strengthen learner-centered education and to remove policy barriers. And then another example, again, back to Matt Owens, is the nonprofits that participate in our projects will often form partnerships with other participants that they had never worked with before. So this American Association of American Universities and the Veterans of Foreign Wars, both who participated in our budget project, are now working together on issues affecting student veterans. So what happens to the leaders that are participating in our projects? How do they change? So last but not least, our evaluation system shows that there are a variety of impacts that our work produces on those individuals directly. These include things like new relationships, a greater willingness to work with people who they disagree with, and increased likelihood among the leaders to utilize collaborative problem-solving approaches in the future. So just a little bit about the surveys that we've done. We did surveys across multiple projects and then kind of combined the results. And we found that 62% of our participants that we surveyed had formed new relationships. 80% said they're more likely to utilize collaborative problem-solving approaches in the future. And 93% said that they are now willing to partner with someone who they disagree with. So where are we going? How are we growing our impact after our first decade? So there are several ways that we're working to grow our impact. The first, of course, is with the development of new projects, which I'm sure you'll hear more about this afternoon, but we're looking at starting projects potentially on housing affordability, on elections, on gun safety. And we think all of these are issues that are very ripe for our process, and we hope to work as effectively as we can to maximize impact in those new areas. And then we're also working to grow our impact by increasing our visibility and making sure that the examples and the successes and the approaches that we use are highlighted in the media, at national conferences, via podcasts, and different ways so that people know that this is a way of solving problems and that they can take inspiration from it and take up these approaches in their own work. And then the final way is something that we're going to hear a little bit more about later, which is our training and consulting work. And all of those new areas that we're embarking on are really geared towards these two big ambitions that we set out for ourselves at Convergence. And the first one is that we want to see an increasing number of diverse leaders, organizations, and individuals at all levels choosing collaborative processes to bridge differences and to create groundbreaking solutions. So we're working towards that as an impact. And then finally, we want to see that the promotion of collaborative means to address critical issues will gain a strong foothold in the public consciousness, kind of like what we talked about this morning around groundswell. So these are some new areas that we're headed that we hope to be able to share in the coming months and years, even more expansive impact as we continue to work on our projects as well. And I'm open to any questions people may have. Thank you very much.